My name is Eyal Levi, and today I'm going to unbox Sorceress by OPETH from the Live at Red Rocks DVD. Now, this was originally recorded by David Castillo, and I think that this is one of the best sounding concert albums of all time. In some ways, some of these mixes are arguably better than the album mixes, and I'm not talking shit about the album mixes. I think those are great too, but this is kind of pinnacle of live recording. And that's why we're featuring it on Nail the Mix. We've never covered this topic before, and why not start with something that's the best of the best? Now, this is interesting. As you'll see, there are some unique challenges, such as wind, people talking, no natural reverb. Like, it's got its own set of challenges that sometimes you kind of deal with in the studio, but are presented in a whole new context. So without further ado, let's go to Pro Tools and get this on. All right, so I've got Pro Tools open and the tracks are in. And I will just show you first, like I always do, that no plugins, just some basic leveling and panning. My first thing I want to discuss, and I mean, this goes first and foremost beyond anything, this band is great. Like, this band is actually great. I'm going to play just the board recording and skip around a little and just think about what it sounds like typically when you hear a live recording. And this is without a mix on it. And that sounds awesome. And let me say that something that's really cool about this is I know that they left mistakes in on this record just to prove that this is live. There's no retouching on this at all. Sometimes on live albums, you will get, let's just call it pseudo live, to where the basic tracks are recorded at the concert, but then they'll go back and redo certain things in the studio. This is what you see is what you get, and it brings up its own set of challenges. Before we talk about those challenges, let me just point out what some of the instrumentation is. We've got keyboards, a Leslie, which is very important. We've got both guitars. We've got Michael and Frederick. And you see that I believe that this is stage right. Anyways, bass and drums. These tracks sound awesome on their own. Like, I just play these drums. I love this drummer. I always have. But what I love about hearing this is just that you hear that groove that he's known for is just how he plays. remember the first time I saw Opeth, I felt like I was seeing something really, really magical. And part of it had to do with how badass the drums were, but it was the groove that they had. And that is something that you cannot edit in. It's either there or it's not there. And without it, I don't know, man. Things just sound kind of sterile, but you can hear just from these raw tracks, this drummer has got the pocket. So that I just wanted to point that out before I went any further. Also, another thing is, this is just so cool to me, is just listen to these guys' guitar tone together, man. They're so good. All right, enough with that. So not only is the band great, but one thing you got to keep in mind is, since this is live and outdoors, it was recorded at Red Rocks, and there's no natural reverb. Where would it come from? There's just air. So you have to add the ambience yourself. And let me show you what I mean. It matters, especially on the drums, but I'll just like solo a snare to show you. All right, and I mean, I could turn on the audience mics too, but that's not going to give you any reverb. The audience mics are just also capturing what's coming out of the BA and the audience and air. There's no walls for anything to bounce off of. So what's really, really funny to me is when you think about recording things outside. I know when I was first starting to record, and I know that sometimes, like, you get this image in your mind of playing outside and hitting a snare, and it sounds huge. It's weird. Kind of like, it's the same thing as when people say, make it sound like it's in space. And it's a really funny request, because to make it sound like it's in space would be silent. Well, playing things outside, really, all they're going to sound like is dry. So that's something that you're going to have to deal with. You're going to have to give this a natural ambience, a natural sounding ambience that's completely self-created. Now, those of you who have done drum recordings or mixed drum recordings that were done in small dead rooms, well, some of the same techniques might apply here. Not just that, but this band is really smart. They save Michael's voice a lot, which is important. I mean, you know, in the studio, you have the time to do takes, different days, but he's got to be at his best the entire time. And so the vocal duties, they trade off in different spots. And this is smart. It's just crafty. Like here, for instance, you'll notice that this is Michael. And this is the keyboard player. And this is vocal stage right. I'm not sure who that is. Probably Freddie. That you driving chaos, you're a sorceress. When you are, it's all in love. It's in your head. Michael sang that on the record, but the dude's got to carry the show. for, however long it was, an hour and a half, 2 hours. Got to make sure he doesn't burn himself out. But not just that, got to make sure that he has full power whenever he's singing. And so they very intelligently spread out the vocal arrangements. There is a ton of bleed on these tracks. There's a bunch of ways to deal with it, but because of the audience mics and the PA, you ain't going to escape it, and you're going to have to deal with it. Just listen to the amount of bleed just in the vocal.
I'm a sinner when I worship evil, blood a sinner.
God, he's such a good singer. Listen to the bleed in these overheads, too. I'm going to just solo the drums, but I want you to pay attention to the amount of bleed in these drums. That's a lot. Also, now this is an interesting one. I haven't heard of this before, but makes sense. I mean, this is kind of in the mountains, and there's a lot of wind in the mics. And one thing that David Castillo, the mixer, told me is that he needed to choose which of the overhead mics to use because some had more wind than others. And it's subtle at points. I dropped a marker so I could show you, but I would recommend skipping around these tracks and listening for where there's more wind. It's subtle. It sounds like it's like, I'm going to turn up the track, but if you listen closely, you'll hear it in there. And it gets louder and softer at different points, but I mean, it's there. Hear that, especially there. It's like a high whistle. Yeah, so wind. Bet you never had to deal with that one before. Also, you can hear talking. So they had these audience mics or front of house mics, but apparently they were so low to the ground that you could hear people's individual conversations. Now, obviously, it's a live recording, and so you want to get audience noise, but like you can actually hear individual people talking. So you're going to have to deal with that too. I dropped a marker too so that I could point that out. It is in these front of house mics. God, the band sounds good though. But yeah, these are things that are, you're not hearing them crazy loud right now because, well, there's nothing on these tracks. But like when you start adding dynamic processing and all the little details come out, you're going to hear those voices, and you don't want it to sound like there's a conversation going on. So that's something that you are going to have to deal with. So you can hear the talking, But this is nothing that you can't solve. And if you've heard the final mix, which you should listen to, it sounds incredible. So these are all solvable issues. Thanks for watching. If you've enjoyed this unboxing and you want your own shot at mixing these tracks, you want to have a go at it, just go to nailthemix.com, sign up, and we'll see you there.